My name is Rebecca Lewis, and I was 30 years old when I learned exactly how disposable I was to my own family. A few weeks ago, I stood motionless in the hallway of our Naperville house, a coffee mug searing my palm while my mother's voice drifted from the living room, calm, sharp, and merciless. She told my father that I could not be allowed to attend my sister's engagement party, that I would embarrass them in front of the right people, that I would ruin everything they had worked for. In that moment, I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a liability. My sister Christina's engagement to Andrew Clark, the heir to a tech dynasty, wasn't just a celebration, it was a social upgrade, a polished invitation into a world my parents had worshipped from a distance. Christina fit that world perfectly: corporate law, flawless manners, a smile that never faltered. I did not. I lived alone in Chicago, wore hoodies instead of dresses, and spent my nights untangling broken code instead of building connections. So they decided to hide me, to erase me from the picture before anyone important could ask questions. What they didn't know, what made their quiet betrayal almost laughable, was that the very family they were desperate to impress had already trusted me with something far more valuable than appearances. For months, under a confidential freelance contract, I had rebuilt the Clark Company's collapsing flagship app, redesigned its pricing logic, and reversed a post-pandemic freefall they couldn't explain. They praised an invisible expert, never realizing she shared their last name by marriage. On the night I was forbidden to attend, guests would gather at a Lake Michigan resort and pass an innovation display bearing my photo, my name, and a tribute to the mind behind their recovery. The question isn't whether revenge feels sweet. It's what it does to you when you realize the people who tried to hide you were standing on your shoulders all along. I didn't always feel like the embarrassment. In Naperville's suburb, our family gatherings filled the backyard with neighbors and relatives every summer and holiday, while kids ran circles on the grass. I stayed at the edge of the picnic table, counting plates, and wondering aloud why certain relatives drove new cars, yet complained about bills. One 4th of July when I was 11, I asked my uncle straight across the table why his construction company kept borrowing money if profits were supposed to be high. Forks paused. Conversation stuttered. My mother shot me a look that could freeze water, and later in the garage, she pulled me aside with my father right behind her. "Rebecca," she said, voice tight, "just be normal for once, smile, talk about school, don't interrogate people. Your sister knows how to behave at these things. Learn from Christina." Christina, 3 years older, already had the rhythm down perfectly. She greeted guests with the right compliment, asked about vacations, remembered names, and never once asked a question that made anyone squirm. People called her delightful. They called me intense. By my high school graduation dinner at a steakhouse downtown, the gap had widened into something sharper. I lingered near the waiter while he cleared appetizers, asking how much he cleared after taxes on a busy night, and whether the restaurant shared tips fairly. He answered politely. I turned too quickly, elbow catching the edge of his tray. Marinara sauce arced and landed in thick red streaks across a guest's white shirt. Silence swallowed the room. My mother's face went pale as the tablecloth. My father stood so fast his chair scraped back, grabbed my upper arm hard enough to bruise, and hissed through clenched teeth. "This is exactly what I mean. You don't belong in these settings." I walked out past the hostess station and sat on the curb in the parking lot, breathing shallow. Minutes later, Olivia Bennett, my childhood friend who would later become my closest colleague, pushed through the door and sat beside me. Without asking permission, she didn't try to fix it or tell me I was wrong. She just said quietly, "They don't see you, Beck, but one day they'll regret ignoring how sharp your mind really is." Her words landed soft but stayed like a promise I could hold on to when the hurt felt too loud. Looking back, I wonder how many kids felt that same quiet hurt when their own family made them feel like the extra one. The gatherings kept coming after that, but I learned to stay quieter or stay away altogether. Christina became the center of every photo, every toast, every proud story my parents told at work or church, while I faded further into the background at school. I started spending lunch periods in the computer lab, teaching myself basic code on old machines that hummed like distant traffic. I liked how the screen didn't judge how errors could be fixed with a few keystrokes, and how results showed up clean and undeniable by college in Chicago. I was already freelancing small fixes for local businesses, patching websites that crashed under traffic, or optimizing simple databases for shops that couldn't afford full-time. IT. My first real paycheck came from a coffee roaster who said, "You just saved me $3,000 in lost orders that month." I stared at the deposit notification on my phone and felt something shift inside, like a lock turning. Olivia was the one who texted me right after, "Congrats, Beck. That's your proof. Keep going." She had switched to marketing by then, but we stayed close. Swapping late-night messages about work and life, she never once made me feel like my questions were too much or my curiosity a flaw. My parents, on the other hand, treated my freelance gigs like a phase. They would ask about Christina's promotions, her new suits, her firm dinners, then glance at my laptop and say, "So you're still doing that online thing? Maybe it's time for a real job with benefits, Rebecca." I would nod and change the subject because explaining algorithms or retention rates felt pointless. They wanted stories about handshakes and titles, not screens and syntax. The graduation incident stayed with me, though. Not as shame exactly, but as a clear line drawn in the sand. I belonged somewhere else. Somewhere numbers didn't lie and effort showed in black and white on a dashboard. I started saying no to more gatherings, told them I had deadlines, which was true enough. Eventually, they stopped asking as often, and I stopped feeling guilty for it. Olivia would check in after every holiday. She missed me, she said, but understood why I chose quiet apartments and code over forced smiles. Her support kept me steady, reminded me that not everyone measured worth by how well you played the room. Looking back, I wonder how many kids felt that same quiet hurt when their own family made them feel like the extra one. High school came and the computer lab became my real classroom. I spent lunch periods at the old desktops teaching myself code from free online tutorials while classmates ate in the cafeteria. The screen never cared if my questions were too direct or my tone too blunt. I started with simple scripts, then moved to fixing bugs in the school's website that kept crashing during parent portal logins. The IT teacher noticed and let me tinker after hours. By senior year, I was running A/B tests on local business sites for free just to see the metrics improve. It felt clean and honest. Results showed up in numbers, not smiles or small talk. College in Chicago turned that hobby into something sharper. I lived in a cramped dorm near the Loop and took every computer science class I could fit into my schedule. Nights were spent in the lab or my tiny room staring at error logs until they made sense. I began freelancing small jobs, patching websites for coffee shops and boutiques that couldn't afford agencies. One bakery owner paid me $200 to stop her online order form from losing half the submissions. She emailed later saying sales jumped 20% that month. I stared at the deposit notification on my phone and felt something shift inside, like a lock turning. My parents still lived in Naperville and dinners there followed the same script. They would talk about Christina's latest promotion at the law firm, how she closed a big case, or got invited to another partner dinner. "She's our pride and joy," my father would say, voice warm. Then they would glance at my jeans and hoodie, ask, "So you're still doing that computer thing? Maybe it's time for a real job with benefits, Rebecca." My mother would add with a polite smile, "We just want stability for you." I would nod and change the subject because explaining load times or conversion rates felt like speaking another language. They wanted stories about courtrooms and handshakes, not terminals and syntax. The gap kept growing until something inside me shifted for good. I realized if they were never going to see value in what I built, I would stop trying to show them in their living room. I registered my own small firm under a simple name and started turning down more family invites, citing deadlines which were real enough. Olivia stayed in touch. She had moved into marketing but kept sending me leads. One evening, she emailed a link to a struggling Chicago startup that needed urgent bug fixes on their e-commerce platform. "This could be big, Beck," she wrote. I took the job, worked through 3 all-nighters, and delivered on time. The founders called me the next week, thanking me profusely. We celebrated over video call, Olivia grinning from her apartment across town, me still in my hoodie with code windows open behind me. That first real client email arrived shortly after subject line, "Thank you, you literally saved us." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Olivia with one word attached: proof. I still remember that first email from a client saying, "You saved us." It felt like proof I wasn't invisible after all. The money wasn't huge, but it was mine, earned without anyone's permission or approval. I used part of it to buy a better laptop, and the rest went straight into savings for the next project. Freelance gigs started coming more steadily through word of mouth and Olivia's network. I learned to negotiate rates, to scope projects properly, to deliver ahead of schedule. Each successful fix built confidence, and each new client added another line to my portfolio. My parents never asked for details, and I stopped offering them. Christina's career continued to climb. She made partner faster than expected, and my parents framed every announcement. I kept my head down in Chicago, building quietly, one commit at a time. The contrast sharpened everything. I understood that my value didn't depend on their recognition. It existed in the problems I solved and the systems I kept running. That realization freed me more than any degree or paycheck ever could. The apartment in Chicago became my command center after college. One sticky afternoon, I opened an email from a familiar agency I had worked with before. The subject line: "Urgent mid-size tech firm, in trouble. Can you help?" The message explained that Clark Tech, their flagship app, had lost massive market share. Post-pandemic user retention tanked, bookings down 60%. The last agency burned through a seven-figure budget with almost nothing to show. They needed someone who could dive into the mess fast and actually fix it. The name Clark hit me immediately, but I pushed it aside and replied, "Yes, send the details." A few hours later, my phone rang. "This is Charles Clark," the voice said, measured but frayed at the edges. "We've been told you can pull numbers out of the fire. No camera. Our connection is bad. Let's keep this audio." That was fine by me. I preferred not being seen over the next hour. He laid it all out. The app was bleeding. Users, competitors, eating, share retention down 60% since the peak. They were losing money fast, and the board was breathing down his neck. He needed a real fix. Not pretty slides. I asked for full access to the back-end analytics, ad accounts, user flows, everything. He hesitated, then agreed. "If your plan works, we have nothing left to lose." I dove in. That night the data was a disaster. Static pricing in a dynamic market, ads targeting broad demographics that missed intent, checkout flow, leaking conversions on mobile. I sketched a plan: dynamic pricing tied to real-time demand, reroute budgets to high-intent search, and targeted social ad user segments for remote workers and weekend locals. Test small scale. First, I told Charles, it was riskier than safe reports. He paused, then said, "Do it to show I believed in it." I structured part of my fee, performance-based. If it failed, I made almost nothing. If it worked, we both won. The first round of tests bombed hard. One algorithm tweak caused a spike in churn. I stared at the red graphs until 3 in the morning, Chicago City, lights flickering outside my window, heart pounding like I had broken something irreversible. I messaged Olivia. She was up late too. She hopped on a quick call, walked through the logs with me, spotted the conflict in the pricing rule. We patched it together, reset the test, and went to bed exhausted. The next cycle turned the corner. Occupancy climbed. Revenue followed the board. Stop breathing down Charles's neck. He called late one evening, his voice lighter than before. "You have no idea what you've done for us, Rebecca. Our team is putting together a case study. While at headquarters, we want your name on it, your photo, everything." I laughed and said, "I preferred behind the scenes, but sent a headshot anyway, just in case." A week later, the mock-up arrived, attached to an email labeled Concept Innovation Board, JPG. I opened it, and my breath caught. A long wall, lined with framed case studies, each with a photo, a title, a A short description near the center. My own headshot cleaner and more confident than I felt in real life beneath a plaque that read, Software Strategist Rebecca Lewis, the mind behind the turnaround dynamic algorithms, demand-driven campaigns, recovery from post-pandemic slump guests would walk past this wall on their way into meetings, clinking coffee cups, while my face watched from the middle. We're planning to unveil this at a major partners event next season. Charles wrote, We'd love to finally meet you, introduce you to the people whose jobs you helped save. I stared at the image for a long time, the irony sinking in that the very company my sister was marrying into had already put my name in gold on their wall, while my family planned to keep me out of the picture entirely. Sometimes I think about how one late-night fix can change everything, and how no one at home would ever know. 3 months after the board mock-up arrived, Christina called me for lunch at a sleek spot in Chicago concrete floors, overpriced cortados. She walked in wearing a tailored blazer, even though it was Saturday. That easy smile already telling me whatever she had to say would make our parents proud. She didn't let me finish my hello. I'm engaged, she said, dropping the word like a trophy to Andrew Clark. The name landed like a glitch. Andrew Clark, the heir to the tech empire I had just pulled back from collapse. Yeah, she said, eyes shining. Her family owns this insane app platform. They host investor events all the time. Dad is freaking out in a good way. I forced a smile. That's great. I'm happy for you. We talked about the proposal, the ring, how our parents reacted. Of course they were thrilled. This was the connection they'd always dreamed of, the gilded doorway into the world they admired from afar. It wasn't until she finished her story that her expression shifted, as if she'd been saving the uncomfortable part for last. So there's a New Year's Eve engagement party. She began tracing the rim of her cup at one of Andrew's family resorts. It's going to be huge. Her parents are inviting donors, business partners, a couple of politicians. It's a big deal. I nodded, waiting for the part where she asked if I needed help, booking a flight or choosing a dress. Instead, she cleared her throat. Look, Rebecca, I think it's better if you sit this one out. I stared at her. Sit it out. It's your engagement party. It's a very particular crowd, she said slowly. Andrew's parents, their friends, they're used to a certain environment. You know how you get in those situations. How I get, I repeated, voice sharper. She lifted her hands like a shield. You ask those heavy questions, you make people uncomfortable. You don't really play the game. Dad thinks it might be too stressful for you. Too stressful for me, or too embarrassing for you? I asked. She winced, which told me everything I needed to know. I laughed, but it came out flat, so I'm not invited to my own sister's engagement party. Because I don't fit the optics, she couldn't meet my eyes. It's not like that. We'll have a smaller family dinner later. Just us. You know, I love you, right? You know, this is just strategy. When I got home, my parents were in the Naperville living room. Voices low and urgent. I stopped in the hallway unseen. Your sister's in-laws are elite, Paul was saying. We can't risk Rebecca rambling about money or calling out someone's business model. She'll ruin it. Sharon sighed. She doesn't mean to, Tom, but this could be Christina's doorway into something better. We can't let her ruin it. The words landed harder than any slap later. Olivia called after I told her everything. She listened quietly, then said, You should tell them now. Beck, let them see what you've done. I refused. Not yet, the timing wasn't right. That same evening, an email notification popped up from Charles' subject line. Quick update. And thank you. I clicked it open. He had written a full paragraph about how transformative the turnaround had been, how the board went from panic to excitement. You didn't just tweak a few things, Rebecca. You changed the way we understand our business. We're stronger because of you. The timing of that email felt almost cruel, like the universe was laughing at how small their world really was. New Year's Eve arrived faster than I expected. I watched from the doorway in Naperville as my parents loaded suitcases into the car. My mother in a new dress she couldn't really afford. My father adjusting a tie he bought on sale, but pretended was designer Christina and Andrew ahead of them, already laughing about something private. They waved and I waved back. The quiet daughter told to stay home, for everyone's good. The car pulled away and the house went silent. A heavy quiet that pressed on my chest, like a weight back in my Chicago apartment. I kept the lights low and opened my phone as the notifications started coming. Photos from my mother first, the resort lobby, dripping with chandeliers, then the grand staircase. Christina walking down in a silver gown like she stepped out of a magazine. Video clips followed champagne towers, live band fireworks bursting over Lake Michigan in the background. My father telling someone that's my daughter up there, marrying into the Clark family. I stared at the screen until the images blurred. They were inside the world they had always worshipped, the glittering elite circle. And they had done everything to make sure I was nowhere near it. I closed the photos and opened a different window, the analytics dashboard for Clark Tech. Year-end performance. Real-time numbers flickered across the screen, rows of data showing reservations pouring in occupancy rates, climbing revenue bars, filling in the lines I had helped bend upward, turning into bonuses and stability for people who would never know my name. I watched the graphs move, feeling the familiar quiet satisfaction that came from fixing something broken. An email notification popped up in the corner subject line. Year-end update and special request from Charles. First clicked it open, half expecting a brief thank you and spreadsheet. Instead, he had written a full paragraph about how the year had been transformative, how the board went from panic to open excitement. You didn't just tweak a few things, Rebecca, you changed the way we understand our business. We want to honor that properly. There was an attachment labeled Concept Wall of Innovation, JPG. When I opened it, my breath caught. It was the mock-up from before, but finalized the long wall at headquarters lined with frames. My photo in the center plaque reading Software Strategist, Rebecca Lewis. The description summarizing the turnaround dynamic algorithms, demand-driven campaigns, recovery from post-pandemic slump. Guests would walk past this wall on their way into meetings clinking coffee cups, while my face watched from the middle. We're unveiling this at the upcoming gala. Charles continued. We'd love to have you there. Introduce you to the team in person. Olivia called a few minutes later. She had seen the same photos on her feed from mutual friends. She asked how I was holding up. I told her everything. The exclusion, the fireworks, the dashboard, the email. She listened without interrupting, then said, It hurts now. But one day they'll see what they missed. I vented about the irony how the family that hid me was celebrating in the very empire I helped save. She agreed. The hurt was real, but so was my work. We talked until the distant echo of Chicago fireworks faded outside my window. Watching those fireworks from my quiet apartment, I realized how far apart our worlds had become and how much closer mine actually was to theirs. Months after that New Year's Eve, the contract started expanding. Clark Tech signed long-term extensions, pulling me into daily calls about scaling the app, adding new features, opening international markets, even acquisitions in California and the Caribbean. I ran simulations on pricing shifts for shoulder seasons, mapped out user retention models for new demographics. The work blurred into dashboards and strategy decks, the kind of projects that made late nights feel worthwhile. My bank account felt it too. I traded my old car for a reliable hybrid, finally fixed the leak in my apartment ceiling, and moved to a one-bedroom with better light and no creaking floors. I did it all quietly, no announcements, no social posts. I knew exactly how my parents would react if I explained performance bonuses or retention curves. They would smile, nod, and ask if I had considered a real job at a local office. Christina's life looked like a highlight reel. My mother sent constant updates, photos of her and Andrew at wine tastings, charity balls, luxury retreats, screenshots of articles mentioning the Clark name with captions like, "Your sister was there last night." Can you imagine over Sunday dinner in Naperville, when I did show up? The conversation revolved around wedding plans, guest lists, How incredible it was that our family would soon belong at events where people wore tuxedos and talked offshore accounts one night, over meatloaf. Christina said. Graham is bringing in some kind of genius consultant for their new data strategy guys, basically a wizard with numbers. If I play this right, I could end up working on some of those deals. My mother looked impressed. See, that's the kind of company you want to be around, people who know how to make things happen. I took a slow sip of water to hide my reaction. I wondered what she would say if I told her the so-called wizard had spent that morning arguing with Charles about capping user acquisition during holidays to protect long-term value. And that wizard was me, but I didn't say anything. Let them talk about proximity to power. I was busy building it one afternoon. An email came from Charles's assistant. We're finalizing details for the Partners and Family Gala at our Lake Michigan flagship. It's both a celebration of this year's turnaround and an engagement celebration for Miss Christina Lewis and Mr. Andrew Clark. Charles and Ruth are especially excited to honor you that evening. They'd like you front and center when we unveil the innovation wall. Attached was the official invitation, embossed and heavy, even through the screen. My name printed near the top under Strategic Partners, Christina's name, lower under Family of the Bride. For a second, I just stared. I hadn't heard from my parents yet about this event. But I could already imagine the conversation they'd brag about being invited to an ultra-exclusive gala at the Clarks' favorite resort. How limited the guest list was. How only the right people were allowed in, and somewhere between speeches and champagne, they'd planned to keep me out of the picture again. The difference this time was simple. The Clarks weren't inviting me as Christina's awkward sister. They were inviting me as the person who changed the trajectory of their business. I called Charles to confirm details, keeping my voice steady. He sounded genuinely excited. We've been telling everyone about you, he said. I can't wait to see their faces when they realize the person behind those numbers is real. I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and let the irony sink in. My family had spent months trying to manage me out of their perfect narrative, convinced I would embarrass them in front of their elite in-laws. But at this gala in that glittering resort, there would be no hiding me. My face would be waiting for them the moment they walked through the door, framed in gold, my name etched in metal, hearing her praise the wizard, without knowing it was me. That was the moment I knew the truth would hit harder than any words I could say. The Lake Michigan resort looked exactly like the kind of place my parents had always fantasized about: marble floors, towering palms, oversized floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first car the night of the gala. The air was warm and humming with money. Staff in crisp uniforms moved like choreography, guiding guests toward the grand ballroom. I arrived early as requested, not as Christina's sister, but as one of the strategic partners. A coordinator handed me a badge with my name in clean black letters. Rebecca Lewis, software strategist. Seeing it made something twist in my chest. For once, my identity wasn't minimized into "she does something online" inside the foyer. The innovation wall stretched along one side, gold frames, soft lighting. Each case study, telling a piece of the company's survival story. My frame sat near the center. My photo, my name, my work. Charles and Ruth came over, all smiles and genuine warmth. They introduced me to board members, department heads, people whose livelihoods were tied to decisions I had helped shape for the first hour. I forgot about my family entirely. I talked numbers, future plans, laughed at a CFO's joke about forecasting. I was in my element. Then I heard my mother's voice. It floated in from the lobby, high and nervous. "Oh, this place is... wow. Christina, look at that chandelier." I turned just enough to see them enter, my father in a suit that suddenly looked cheaper under the chandeliers, my mother clutching a clutch bag like it might run away, Christina and Andrew walking ahead like they belonged there. My instinct was to shrink back, but the staff had already been trained on who I was. One of them stepped forward, smiling at me. "Ms. Lewis, can we get you near the wall?" Mr. Clark wants you close for the announcement, so instead of hiding, I found myself standing just a few feet from my own framed photo as my family crossed the foyer. They didn't see me at first. Their eyes were on the decor, the people, the promise of what this night meant for them. Ruth gently tapped her champagne glass, calling for attention. Guests turned, conversation softening to a hush. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice clear. "Tonight is about family and partnership, about the people who held this company up when things looked impossible." She gestured toward the wall. "Over the last year, we built this to remind ourselves that numbers are not just charts, they are people, people who changed everything when we needed it most." She stepped closer to my frame, smiling. "One of those people is someone very dear to us now." She pointed right at my photo. "This is Rebecca Lewis." The floor seemed to tilt for a second. My parents froze mid-sentence. Christina's head snapped toward the sound of my name. Ruth read the plaque out loud. "Software strategist. The mind behind the turnaround that kept this platform alive when everything was at its worst. You have no idea how often we've said her name this year." She turned, following the line from the frame to where I stood, then her eyes went wide, like she'd just solved a puzzle she hadn't realized was there. "Rebecca," she said louder, full of delight. "Rebecca Lewis, you're here. You're Christina's sister." Head swiveled. Dozens of people turned to look at me, then at Christina, then at my parents. The silence that followed said more than any speech. Charles stepped up beside Ruth, his gaze landing on my family with professional politeness that had just turned sharp. "You never told us your daughter was our Rebecca," he said to my parents. Paul opened his mouth shut. It looked like he wanted to melt into the marble. My mother stammered. We didn't realize you knew her like that. She does some kind of computer work. We didn't think it was important for tonight." A few nearby guests exchanged looks. Charles's jaw tightened just enough for me to catch it. "Important," he repeated. "Without her, this party doesn't happen. This building doesn't stay this full. Half the room owes her." Ruth laughed lightly, trying to soften the tension, but her words carried. "Wait, we've been bragging about her for months. I can't imagine hiding someone like Rebecca." Christina's face went pale. She looked at me like I had betrayed her simply by existing. "Rebecca," she said under her breath when she finally reached me. "You didn't tell me you were working with them." I held her gaze. "You didn't ask later." Away from the crowd, my parents cornered me in a quiet hallway. My mother's voice shook. "You made us look like fools," she whispered. "We had no idea." I cut her off gently, that I mattered to them, that my work mattered, or that your embarrassing daughter became the person propping up your precious in-laws' empire. My father tried to recover his authority. "You could have warned us, Rebecca. We would have prepared differently." I almost laughed. "Prepared how?" "By inviting me this time, by pretending you were proud." Christina stepped forward, eyes glassy. "Look, maybe we handled things wrong," she said. "But you know how Mom and Dad are. We just wanted everything to go smoothly. You do right, want to be part of this family." That was the moment something inside me settled. I realized I'd spent years twisting myself into knots, chasing a version of belonging that always came with conditions. Don't say too much. Don't ask the hard questions. Don't outshine the person they decided was the star. I took a breath. "I will always be your sister," I told Christina, "and I will always be their daughter, but I'm done begging to sit at a table where the price of admission is pretending I'm less than what I am. I'm not going to shrink anymore, so you can appear bigger." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Rebecca, we were just afraid," she said quietly. "Afraid you'd embarrass us." I nodded. "And tonight you found out. The only thing embarrassing was how little you believed in me. That's on you, not on me." Back in the ballroom when Charles introduced me on stage as a key partner, the applause felt different than any approval I had chased growing up. It wasn't polite, clapping from relatives who barely listened. It was people who had seen the results and valued them. People who didn't care if I wore the wrong dress or asked weird questions, as long as I showed up with the kind of clarity that kept their lights on, standing there under that soft golden light. I understood something. I wish someone had taught me years earlier. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't dramatic or cruel. It's choosing to stop handing your worth to people who only know how to discount it. It's letting your success speak in rooms where they never thought your voice would be heard and refusing to dim yourself just so insecure people can feel tall. Weeks later, Christina's firm lost the Clark contract, whispers in Naperville circles about family embarrassment. My parents avoided events they once chased invitations. Dried up. My mother stopped sending photos. My father stopped asking about jobs. I met Olivia for coffee in Chicago. She raised her cup, finally free. I smiled and clinked mine against hers in America Build Empire with Code and Courage No. Need family approval? If this story resonated with you, drop a comment. I'd love to hear how you've built your own path. Thank you all for taking the time to watch the video. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos.